For 3,000 years, the recognized list of pharaohs in Egypt bypassed a gap of 17 years as if those years had simply not happened. Each stone king list that Egyptian priests carefully assembled since the unbroken line of divine rule was the cornerstone of their civilization, leapt from one pharaoh to the next without any explanation. 17 years disappeared. This was not an accident, it was a conclusion. When archaeologists began excavating in the Nile Valley in the 19th century, they discovered evidence of a phenomenon that was then unnamed: systematic erasure. They found walls in tombs and temples where faces had been painstakingly carved out of the stone. The oval frames that held a pharaoh's name, known as cartouches, were scraped down to a smooth, blank surface. The features of the statues were meticulously removed. In this process, the Egyptians were extremely exact. Instead of destroying things out of anger, they carefully removed them, making sure the absence was tidy. This was a deliberate act of engineering, not just vandalism. Someone had decided that a certain person would not be recognized, either now or in the past, and they had invested a great deal of resources to guarantee this. Amenhotep IV, the son of Amenhotep III and a member of Egypt's most powerful dynasty, was the person they tried to erase. Egypt was the world's most advanced civilization during the 14th century BC. Every ruler from Libya to Babylon used its gold as money. The borders had been expanded to the Euphrates by its armed forces. Its temples were among the world's most sophisticated buildings. However, the pharaoh did not own all of that wealth, power, or influence. The temples of Amun were another source of genuine power in Egypt. Amun priests served as more than just religious authorities. They had grown to be the biggest landowners in Egypt by the time young Amenhotep IV ascended to the throne. They were in charge of large estates, business networks, and national official appointments. They hired a large number of people and collected taxes. They functioned as a parallel government in reality. The pharaoh was supposed to be a god, but he shared power with an establishment that had been accumulating power for centuries and had grown quite skilled at it. When Amenhotep IV saw this arrangement, he came to the realization that he was only the most prominent figure in Egypt, not the most powerful. The difference is substantial. He did not want to use an army to overthrow the priests, because it would be difficult to justify and impossible to defeat such a deeply ingrained religious institution in the nation's history. They had to become outdated. A new god was necessary for him. The sun disk had long been a small component of Egyptian worship, so the idea of the Aten was not wholly original. However, Amenhotep IV declared it to be the only god, something that no other Egyptian ruler had done: the singular presence of God, the one indisputable truth. He took on the name Akhenaten, which means effective for the Aten, and he shut down all of Egypt's Amun temples with a single decree. This was not a slow process for him. He didn't try to reach a compromise. He merely declared it, as though the reality he had selected was already established. Everything that came after would be characterized by this method of accepting his conclusions as gospel. Akhenaten believed that Thebes, the ancient capital with its long history of priestly power, was irreparably tarnished by the old order, so he did more than just close the temples of Amun. Consequently, he built a new capital. He chose a section of desert cliffs on the east bank of the Nile, roughly halfway between Thebes and the Nile Delta. It had no prior religious significance, established hierarchies, or inherited allegiances. There was nothing on it. He gave it the name Akhenaten, which translates to the horizon of the Aten, but today we call it Amarna. In his capacity as pharaoh and the earthly embodiment of the Aten, he made a solemn vow to never leave this place and inscribed this vow under his own name on boundary stones at the city's perimeter. By doing this, he was effectively promising himself a cage under the guise of a kingdom. Amarna emerged from obscurity in just a few years, which is truly an impressive feat. It involved thousands of laborers, large amounts of quarried limestone, and a completely new city layout designed in grids, featuring a central royal road and magnificent temples dedicated to the Aten, who was the sun and thus needed no roof overhead. The artistic style of Amarna was unlike anything previously created in Egypt. While traditional Egyptian royal art was rigid, formal, and geometrically precise, Amarna's art was more personal. Akhenaten was shown playing with his daughters, and Nefertiti was depicted in poses that exuded genuine grace. There were illustrations of family life, love, and a human experience that had never been recognized in Egyptian royal art before. It was, by any fair assessment, stunning and entirely disconnected from the outside world. While Akhenaten composed hymns for the Aten, such as the Great Hymn to the Aten, which is still regarded as a truly remarkable work of poetry, the administrative structures of the empire were starting to break down. In addition to upsetting religious beliefs, the temple's closure affected Egypt's local government, healthcare, education, grain storage, and redistribution. Closing them was like closing a hospital, a granary, a school, and a tax office all at once. It was not the same as closing a church. Even though Akhenaten had chosen a different god, the people who relied on those services continued to need them. And the letters came next. During an excavation at the ancient Amarna site in 1887, a peasant woman discovered something remarkable, a cache of clay tablets written in cuneiform script, the ancient Near Eastern diplomatic language. The 382 tablets in this collection are now called the Amarna letters. Canaan, Byblos, Ugarit, and Babylon were among the vassal states and allied kingdoms of Egypt that sent these letters. They portrayed an empire that was beginning to disintegrate and were written by kings and governors who recorded real events as they happened. The Hittites were on the move, gradually incorporating Egyptian vassal states in Syria. Governors who had sworn allegiance to Egypt were witnessing Hittite troops encroaching on their territories and were urgently reaching out to Amarna for Egyptian military support. "They are seizing our cities. They are capturing our people. We implore you to send soldiers. We ask for gold. We request anything. We have remained loyal. Egypt has been our guardian. Where is Egypt?" Meanwhile, Egypt was engaged in writing poetry. The clay tablets were stored in rooms in Amarna, with some seemingly never having been opened. Around 1341 BC, in the 12th year of Akhenaten's rule, Amarna saw a significant change. Foreign delegations had just finished their important durbar, where they paid their respects. At the height of his power, envoys from all over the world came to his city to recognize his divinity and power. The Amarna letters soon ceased mentioning specific names. The records no longer mentioned Princess Akhenaten, the second daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Then, another daughter did the same. Nefertiti herself was eventually mentioned infrequently, and eventually she was hardly mentioned at all. Most Egyptologists believe that a plague was the cause. Disease spread along the same trade routes that brought diplomatic letters and tribute. Akhenaten's family was not protected by his god. In Amarna, there is a tomb relief that depicts Akhenaten and Nefertiti grieving over their daughter's body. The Amarna style, which had developed a language of intimacy that traditional Egyptian art lacked, effectively conveys their sorrow. This is a father mourning his child, captured in stone in a style he advocated for, created by artists he trained. The artwork reveals emotions that official records do not acknowledge. He truly felt this loss. No matter how isolated his thoughts became, or how completely his religious vision distanced him from the practical realities of his empire, he was not devoid of feeling. This does not excuse his neglect, but it complicates the view of him as merely a tyrant. The mystery surrounding Nefertiti's absence from historical records has sparked more debate among historians than nearly any other issue related to the Amarna period. Some believe she perished during the years of the plague, while others, a theory that has gained considerable support from recent studies, suggest she became co-pharaoh under the name Neferneferuten, ruling alongside or possibly after Akhenaten as his health deteriorated. What is clear is that by the end of Akhenaten's reign, significant changes had occurred within the palace at Amarna. The vibrant creativity of the earlier years had vanished. The city, once built on a wave of visionary inspiration, was now merely surviving on the remnants of that inspiration, which is a completely different scenario. A vision fosters growth, whereas inertia merely sustains, and mere maintenance cannot uphold an empire when its very foundations are being eroded. Egypt was conducting its own assessment outside the parameters of the pharaoh's viewpoint. The country's administrative structure had been destroyed by the closure of the temples. Egypt's reputation as a reliable protector was damaged, and its Syrian territories were lost as a result of its failure to respond to the Amarna letters. The economy of temple workshops, granaries, and trade networks had been left unsupported by the redirection of all religious resources to the new Aten cult. Egypt was not in danger of collapsing. It was just too big and old to collapse quickly. Still, it was getting smaller, silently and steadily in all directions, like a man with a back injury who is not aware that he is bleeding. Akhenaten passed away around 1335 BC, and the details surrounding his death remain unclear. His mummy has not been conclusively identified. He died in Amarna, the city he had vowed never to abandon, without resolving any of the crises that arose during his rule. The empire he took over had diminished, and the religious system he dismantled had not been replaced with a viable alternative. The deity he had promoted had not fulfilled his promises in any tangible way. Furthermore, the city he constructed, the White City, the city of pure sunlight, intended to be the capital of a new era, was already beginning to show signs of decline. Sand was accumulating at the edges of the colonnade, limestone was fading in color, and the boundary steel that bore his oath stood on the desert cliffs, precisely where he had commanded, overseeing a city that was quietly starting to prepare for its eventual ruin. Akhenaten was succeeded, through a complicated series of short reigns, by a boy king whose original name was Tutankhaten, living image of the Aten. He was probably Akhenaten's son. The boy king changed his name. He became Tutankhamen, living image of Amun. The priests of Amun were back, and they had been waiting. The restoration of Amun was not a slow acceptance of religious diversity. It was a calculated effort to erase history. The priests and officials who came after, leading up to the military ruler Horemheb, who carried out the most extensive erasure, did not simply reopen the ancient temples and return to previous customs. They systematically removed Akhenaten from the historical record. His name was chiseled away from every monument, every list of kings, and every temple wall. His statues were not destroyed in a moment of anger, but rather methodically and intentionally as part of a policy. Amarna itself was eventually dismantled. Its limestone blocks were taken and used in other construction, leaving only the foundations buried under the desert sand. In any surviving official documents from this time, he was not referred to as Akhenaten. Instead, he was called the criminal or the enemy when mentioned. The concept of damnatio memoriae, a Roman term that historians refer to when discussing the intentional removal of an individual from history, presents a paradox. It is ultimately ineffective. The meticulousness of the removal serves as proof. Each empty cartouche acts as a statement, and every polished wall bears a signature. When you notice that 17 years are absent from every list of kings, you don't assume those years were dull. Instead, you deduce that something significant occurred during that time, that someone desperately wanted to conceal. Akhenaten aimed to be the sole deity, but ended up as a mere spectre. However, spectres are still present. They leave traces behind. In their absence, they assert their existence loudly. Akhenaten's original contributions did not completely fade away after his death. Amarna art's distinct style had a long-lasting impact on Egyptian aesthetics. The great hymn to the Aten bears a striking resemblance to Psalm 104 from the Hebrew Bible, and scholars have been studying the relationship between the two for over a century. His concept of monotheism, the belief in a single, universal divine entity symbolized by the sun, which illuminates all equally, would later influence people's religious beliefs in a variety of ways. While he did not achieve his goals, the ideals he upheld did not go unnoticed. They traveled, as ideas do, through the writings and prayers of others, eventually laying the groundwork for the society he wished to create but was too isolated to realize. The fundamental failure of Akhenaten was not that his idea was incorrect. Instead, it was his deep infatuation with his own vision that rendered him incapable of recognizing others. He could perceive the Aten, Nefertiti, his children, his city, and his hymn, yet he was blind to the governor of Byblos writing urgent letters, the average Egyptian family outside the sealed granary, and the Hittites moving across the landscape. A leader who becomes too attached to their own vision, to the detriment of the people it is intended to serve, does not fail because the vision is wrong. They fail because that vision becomes their only focus. This story raises an important question we must consider whenever we meet someone or an institution that is absolutely convinced of its own righteousness. What are they failing to see?